I was assigned to Vietnam initially in 1965 when the big buildup occurred after the Monroe Bay incident. I was initially assigned as the Assistant Senior Junk Force Advisor in Saigon. In September of that year, I was transferred to Advisory Detachment in Roksha, Kinjang Province in the 4th Military Region. And then in 1966, I was assigned as Project Officer for the construction of market time bases in Katla, the Vung Tau area, and Cam Bay. I left there to go to executive officer of an LSD, which returned to Vietnam to provide logistics support for U.S. and Vietnamese units throughout Vietnam. And then was reassigned to Vietnam again in 1969 and commander of the Coastal Squadron 1 Swift boats, headquartered at Cam Bay, and stayed there until we turned the last boat over to the Vietnamese through the ACT-OUT program in December 1970. My first assignment as an advisor, I came to really appreciate the problems the Vietnamese were having, both civilian and military. You went from the depths of despair to the heights of elation. Successes weren't frequent, but those that you had were spectacular. As an advisor to the Junk Force, when I started, it was a paramilitary organization. You went and recruited just local fishermen or rice paddy farmers or whatever. They weren't military. Their leadership was pretty much Army rejects. An Army officer who got in trouble with his commanding officer found himself transferred to the Junk Force, which did have a requirement for Army officers because they were responsible for their own base defense, and most of the junk bases were located in hostile territory. As a matter of fact, we had one in Chulai that was overrun in July of 1965, and both American advisors were killed during the attack. They were 5 miles away from a U.S. Marine base, and the Marines couldn't get there in time to save them. So base defense was a problem, but the Vietnamese weren't really interested in going on sea patrols. They were very prone to motion sickness, and most of them with Army backgrounds just saw no need for it at all. We patrolled today, we found no VC. We didn't patrol today, and we didn't find any VC. So not patrolling and patrolling equated to the same thing. So why patrol? And to encourage them to get out and effectively patrol and do board and search operations and look for VC was our prime function. There was no way we could provide true logistic support to a man on a junk who was eating fish heads and rice. We weren't going to supply him with rice, we weren't going to supply him with fish heads. We weren't going to give them better boats. We were supposed to. The Swift boats that ended up in Coastal Squadron 1 were originally ordered to be turned over to the Vietnamese as military assistance equipment. And every Swift boat was to replace 5 junks in the coastal surveillance effort. Several things happened. One, we found out what the true cost of these boats were, $250,000 each by the time they were modified. And the fact that Operation Market Time was transferred from 7th Fleet to Chief of the Naval Advisory Group in Vietnam. And once they did that, we wanted the boats ourselves. So when they arrived in country, they arrived with American crews instead of Vietnamese crews. And we just kind of took over the operation. We'll show the Vietnamese how to do it. And we showed them, and they sat back and watched. So a couple of officers I found in Vietnam would have been effective in anyone's military. Most of them French trained, the Oriental save face concept don't give an order because the order may be disobeyed, and if the order is disobeyed, you look bad. A couple of officers that I found were American trained, and they believed in discipline and military attitudes, and they gave orders, and they enforced their orders. Mostly, we consider them to be terrible people. Why? They mistreated their crews. They actually made them go out to patrol. Commander of the 4th Coastal Zone, for example, Lieutenant Commander Lewitt, and he and I became very close friends. He told his commanding officers that you will go on patrol. They refused. So he found a rock as big as their head, had them hold it on their head, and walked them out into the water until the water was at the lip line. And he says, now, stand there until you get so tired that you drown, or you decide to go on patrol. They decided to go on patrol. We tried to get Lewitt relieved because he was not exercising good leadership. He was the only effective leader they had. Those were the kinds of depths of despair that we found. As commander of Coastal Squadron 1, my duties were administrative. I was the administrative commander of a unit that, when it operated for Commander Task Force 115. So I really didn't have a lot of control over their operations. I finally, by the time I was through, had worked my way into a position where I had some control over the operations. And in May of 1970, I commanded a unit that was tasked to escort a Vietnamese relief force into Phnom Penh, Cambodia, to rescue some 10,000 ethnic Vietnamese who were being threatened with death. I took the last of the swift boats from Coastal Division 13 to do the escorting duties. And we got as far as the Neek Long Ferry, about 20 miles inside of Cambodia, and Admiral Zumwalt is standing on the riverbank with his hand held up. President Nixon says you can't go past this point, so the Vietnamese then had to go on by themselves. I stayed in that first 20 miles of the Mekong River, providing some support and a backup and doing board search operations, river control for about 30 days before the operation was over. So those are the types of things that we did. I accompanied many combat patrols. By the time I left and was turning the last of the boats over to the Vietnamese, I honestly realized how futile the whole damn thing was. I knew they weren't going to be militarily successful, and if they couldn't be militarily successful, they weren't going to be politically successful. Unfortunately, I almost went back for the evacuation of Saigon and personally led the evacuation of the boat people. I was the guy out on the boat in charge and picking up the 55,000 boat people that came out and got them delivered to our amphibious ships so we could evacuate them to Guam and Subic Bay in the Philippines. It was a sad end to a sad war. The Vietnamese were nice people. They deserved a hell of a lot more than they gave themselves or we gave them. But it was all to be done over again. I'll go back and do it again.